Good day, philosophers. In our second video of this module, we're going to really dig into now Plato's Timaeus, which is and just a very short text from Plato's Timaeus, because here we'll see essentially Plato's definition of time, through the mouth of Timaeus. Now, just a quick aside, the Timaeus is a very different text than other texts we'll read by Plato. So traditionally, we encounter Socrates engaging in a conversation with other folks. There is actually a little bit of that in the Timaeus, but the vast majority of the Timaeus is a long speech given by a guy whose name was shockingly Timaeus, right? And Timaeus essentially is giving a creation account of reality itself, where everything's come from. And right in the middle of this, we see a couple of interesting paragraphs that fundamentally talk about time, and we'll see Plato's definition of time, right? So let's turn to the Timaeus really quickly and see what Plato had to say, and we'll encounter, just to anticipate this fundamental idea that if we're going to understand time, we're going to have to understand it in relationship to change. Absolutely. Okay, so let's see. What was Plato's definition of time? Here we see just quickly, and I'll open up the text and read more than anything else. But right here, where I have sort of underlined right in the middle of the text, where here we see Plato say, Timaeus say, and so he began to think of making a moving image of eternity. A moving image of eternity. And blah, 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 blah. This image, and we see at the end, the image, of course, is what we now call time. So Plato's Timaeus. In this text, we're going to see a definition of time that says that time is a moving image of eternity. Okay, time is a moving image of eternity. That's great, right? But to say that time is a moving image of eternity, it could be kind of almost saying nothing at all. If time is a moving image of eternity, it implies a couple of things here, right? That we need to understand, kind of importantly, what eternity is. What is eternity, right? What is eternity, right? And we also kind of need to understand, how is time an image of it? How is time an image of it? What does it mean to be an image of something like eternity, right? What the heck is Plato or Timaeus technically, but I'll say Plato even talking about here, right? Well, let's just take a step back. One thing that I'll say is that Plato does not use the word eternity the same way that we tend to use it, I think, in English. A lot of times when we say eternity, we almost make it as equivalent to forever. You might have thought after you're watching that last lecture, oh my gosh, this lecture is going on forever. Or you might say, this class is taking an eternity, right? And what are you trying to say there? You're okay, in your mind, you're saying the exact same thing. It's just it's going on and on and on, and there's no end. It's just going on forever, right? And eternity, we're going to see, is actually crucially different from that. We're going to see that for Plato, eternity is not quite the same thing as forever. It makes sense why someone would think of the two as related, but in particular, we're going to see that eternity is not that, right? And now, how is eternity going to be an image? How is time going to be an image of eternity? Well, that's going to get really weird, because one of the things that we'll encounter that as soon as we start reading Plato, that when Plato uses the word time and uses the word eternity, he almost means things that are the extreme opposites of one another, contraries of one another, right? So time, in some ways, is the opposite of eternity. Now, okay. If we're going to say that time is in some ways the opposite of, that says opposite, oh my gosh, if only I took more time to write neatly. Yeah, I'm even recording this. I might as well write neat. No, that doesn't make any sense. That says opposite. I'll write underneath it, opposite. But time is a kind of opposite of eternity. Okay. Well, if it's the opposite of eternity, then how can it be an image of it? There's some weird things going on here. And what does it even mean to say that time is the opposite of eternity? Well, that's what we're going to kind of dig into first here. We're going to start reading the text. And actually, in order to understand Plato's definition of time as a moving image of eternity, we're going to really have to first dig into how time is the opposite of eternity. See what what are the ultimate distinctions Plato makes between time and eternity. And then we'll then actually through looking at how time and eternity are so completely different, we'll see how what aspect of time can be that image that connects the two together. So it's kind of a crazy thing. So we're actually going to read through the text here, and we're going to be a little bit careful here. So I'm open up the physical book. Of course, I didn't require that you get this book because this is like such a we're only really reading a couple paragraphs here, right? So I'm going to actually go back a little bit further from what we saw. And our goal is going to be to essentially set up the distinction between what time and eternity are. We're going to essentially be creating a list of differences between time and eternity. So let's read together. I'm looking at the very bottom of the first page that you guys had. For me, it's page 23. And here we see, again, this is a kind of creation story. We read Timaeus saying, "Now, when the Father who had begotten the universe observed it set in motion and alive, a thing that had come to be as a shrine for the everlasting gods, he was well pleased." It's a very creation-y story, right? "And in his delight, he thought of making it more like its model still. Let me turn the page. So as the model, make sure you can read it, was itself an everlasting living thing, he set himself to bring this universe to completion in such a way that it too would have that character to the extent that it was possible." Okay, now here we go. This was underlined before. "Now it was the living thing's nature to be eternal." Right? So there was already existing somehow this eternal living thing, right? But he says, "But it's not possible to bestow eternity fully upon anything that is begotten." You can't create something and make it eternal. So he says, "And so he began to think of making a moving image of eternity." Let's make something that is a moving image of eternity. At the same time as he brought order to the heavens, he would make an eternal image moving according to number, of eternity remaining in unity. This image, of course, is what we now call time. All right, so let's start to see this. We immediately see here that of course eternity came first, and then time came afterwards. And notice that he said something that was very important. That the first important difference is he thinks about time as something that's moving according to number, right? Whereas eternity remains in unity. Right? Well, okay. So if time is moving according to number, there's a kind of, we're talking about a lot of something, but unity is how many? Unity is one. Now, already, I don't know if anyone caught this. Already we see a theme that we saw come up in our last module. Do you guys catch it? A theme of the one and the many. Just like how Socrates saw the one wise person, in some ways himself, as being contrasted with the many and their view of justice and whether it was good, we actually see that same theme here show up metaphysically. That when we think about eternity is connecting to one, to unity, while time is connecting to manyness, number, right? And so if you think about even number itself, numbers are kind of funny things. Like, when do you notice numbers? Like when you're a kid and it's your birthday, you might like count the candles on your birthday cake and you might be like, "Oh, Mommy, look, I have 7 candles and I'm 7 years old." I don't know why I have some weird bad British accent there. But you'll notice many numbers, right? And it's because the manyness of those candles show up to you. In fact, when we think about numbers themselves only really come into existence when you think of and you notice the manyness of something, when you're paying attention to the fact that there is more than one, right? However, if you're looking at like a pair of pants where there's 2 legs, you don't necessarily think of the 2 legs. You just think of it as a unity, as a single pair of pants. Even like a pair of shoes, you might think of as a single unity unless one was missing. And then you pay attention to the fact that there was 2. So numbers, philosophically, we like to reflect, actually only seem to come about when we start to notice manyness, multiplicity, more than one. But if something's truly in unity, you don't even think about the number of it. It's just that object in and of itself, right? And so like to think about the birthday analogy again, like you might say, "Mummy, there's 7 birthday candles." But what if someone was to say this, "Mummy, why do I only have 1 birthday cake? I'm 7 years old. I should have 7 birthday cakes." Hopefully, maybe someone, I bet you there's been someone in history who's thought that, but you don't pay attention to how many birthday cakes you have. You don't think about the fact that there's 1 of them because there only ought to be 1, right? Oneness is a thing. So The very fact of number comes up as something that only exists when you have manyness, when you have multiplicities. But eternity is like a unity where there is no numbering at all. It's just oneness. Like, okay, so all right, let's read some more. So now we get to more descriptions that sound like creation stories, right? So before the heavens came to be, there were no days, no nights, no months or years, right? And he these are so he devised their coming to be. These are all parts of time, right? And so days, nights, years, all of that, those are just parts of time. But now this is interesting. Now when you get to like some words, and was and will be are forms of time that have come to be, right? So if you think about time, there's was and there will be. Right? Such notions we unthinkingly but incorrectly apply to everlasting being. So let's take everlasting being to mean eternity, right? Here, that means that there was no was and there is no will be in everlasting being. Now, what do we think of when we think of was and will be? Was and will be are connected to past and future. So essentially, we see here that according to this account, in eternity, there's no past and there's no future. Right? Now, that's a little bit different than forever. Because if you think about this class is taking forever, right? There was a past and there is a future. You're just in that moment. You don't see how the future is ever going to come. Like you imagine a future way off in the distance where this class is no longer happening and you get to just like live a happy life. And so you anticipate a different future. But notice here, we're saying that there is no past and there is no future for eternity. Okay. Well, let's continue. There's some other weirdness, right? It says, for we say that it was and is and will be, right? It, referring to eternity. We say that eternity was and is and will be. But according to the true account, only is appropriately said of it. So this is interesting. When Plato talks about eternity, when Timaeus here is talking about eternity, and I'm going to interpret that as Plato himself, he says that in eternity there only is. Only is appropriately said of it, right? Now notice that he doesn't actually say anything really clear about is when it comes to time, right? There almost is no real is of time. And it's kind of this ambiguity, right? So he says, was and will be are properly said about the becoming that passes in time, for these two are motions. But that which is always changeless and motionless cannot become either older or younger in the course of time, and never became, nor is it now such that it has become so, nor will it ever be in the future. And in all, none of the characteristics that becoming has bestowed upon things that are born about in the realm of perception are appropriate of it. Thinking about eternity, right? So when we see eternity, we don't have this realm in eternity, we have this realm of just being, right? Just being itself. Where in time, we'll notice Plato uses this term becoming, right? That there's some kind of becoming there. There's always some coming to be, right? And he says, and what is more, we also say things like these, that what has come to be is what it has come to be, that what is coming to be is what it is coming to be, and also that what will come to be is what will come to be, and that what is not is what is not. None of these expressions of ours is accurate, right? So he said, we use the word is in becoming, he says, all the time, that something is becoming something like is becoming what it is going to be and stuff like that. He's saying like, that's all gibberish. That's not accurate language, because being is just simply to be. And then he ends up, I like this cute thing, but I don't suppose it's a good time right now to be too meticulous about these matters. He's not going to really like dig into it in great detail, right? But we'll dig more into this, right? When we talk about time and eternity, then we're ultimately thinking about this tension, right? We're thinking about, we've got the past, we've got the future, and then we have the now, right? So here's the past. The past is what was. Then we have the future, right? And that is what will be. And then we have what is, which we sort of think about as right now, right? And we have this tension where we said clearly time is occurring like here's time. We said here's time, but we said that what truly is eternity. And if truly is connected to eternity, we're going to see then that this is precisely where we'll get to see how time is an image of eternity. Because when we talk about the now of time, like what's happening right now is when things are, when things exist. It's what is, right? And so that's great. But the is of time is not like the is of eternity. Just like Plato said that there really is no real is in time. There is some kind of is because things exist right now. And so we need to really flush out this. We need to think about what the present time really means so that we can see how that is going to be our image. So we're going to dig into that in just a second. Now, as we look at this, I just realized I just wrote like will be right there. Let's just think about these words for a second. Was, is, and will be. These words are all connected. These are all tenses of the same word. Like, what's that word? Well, we have the verb to be, right? To be. And what does to be mean? To be or not to be. I mean, we could quote some Shakespeare, right? To be means to exist. And so if we take a step back and we think about it, as we sit here and ponder about the nature of time, we're fundamentally talking about existence. We're talking about what it means to exist as what was, what used to be, what will be, but is not yet, and then simply what is. We're getting into real metaphysics. And so to really understand time, we need to see it as this kind of property of how things exist, right? All right. So let's dig into the now. Let's analyze the now because the now is going to show us how time is an image of eternity. Okay, so let's think about the now. This is I play a video clip from a film called Spaceballs, and I can't really do that right now because I think that would violate all kinds of copyright laws. So I'm not going to play that clip right now. Maybe it wouldn't violate copyrights. I don't know. I'm not going to play the clip. But let's think about the word is, and let's think about right now. And for the first question I have for you is, how long is right now? If you've seen Spaceballs, maybe you know what scene I would show you here. But how long is right now? Like, and I think about right now. How long is right now? I mean, right now you're watching this lecture, right? Maybe you're doing something else at the same time. Who knows? But how long is right now? I just looking at the time. This lecture has been going on for 18 minutes already, which is way longer than I thought it would, right? Big shocker. But is 18 minutes right now? No, because throughout those 18 minutes, there was plenty of times that it was now. So how long is right now? A second? Well, even in the midst of the amount of time I was thinking about if right now is a second, I realized that time passed. Even within each second, time is passing. So like right now isn't really very long at all. I could take a second and I could cut it in half. And I could take a half a second and I could cut it in half. Can I think of like a millionth of a second? Sure. Is there really any smallest amount I could cut up how long right now is? Theoretically, physicists might have some interesting things to say about Planck lengths and stuff. But for us, if we think about it theoretically, there is no limit on how small we could cut up a second to think about how long is right now, right? This present instant. And so that's a great thing. I always I'm a mathematician too. I don't know, maybe that's saying too much. I study math and I teach math, right? Calling me a mathematician makes me sound too fancy. But when I think about really what the now is, you could think of the now as kind of like an asymptote, right? This asymptotic separation between what was and what will be, right? And when we think about what was gets infinitely close to right now, right? The way things existed in the past get infinitely close to it, right? And the future is infinitely close to right now, but neither of them are now, right? That this is the way things were, what was, this is the way things will be, even just an instant from now. But what is this like sliver of existence, this very moment where things are precisely the way they. I did that on purpose. I paused there for a second in the middle of that sentence because we wanted to realize that even as I was speaking, you were thinking about the past, you were anticipating the future, but in the very moment of the very moment that exists right now passes as soon as it happens. Even while in the beginning of the sentence, the end of the sentence is about to be spoken, but every single moment is this new that's completely separate from what was and what will be, and exists for almost no amount of time at all. So I've had this written here for a minute now already, that this present instant, this right now, is like this durationless boundary between what was and what will be, right? However the things are and however the way things exist right now lasts for just an instant. And so when we think about right now, what right now is in the now of time, right? When we think of this now of time, the now of time is like this instant in which things exist and are what they are, right? The now of time, right? The now of time, or the is of time, right? The is of time is really like this instantaneously small way of describing the state of affairs. But as soon, the craziest thing is every single thing that exists right now in this moment is different than the way it was just an instant ago, and is already different from the way it was an instant ago, and is going to be different than the way it will be an instant into the future, right? However the way things exist right now, they exist in a way that's constantly ready to change, constantly like never staying the same. It's like a kind of the things exist, but they exist to just become something else, to just exist and change into something else. And so this is this crucial difference between when we think about the now of eternity and, the now of time, which is the separation between the past and the future, and the is of eternity. Both of them talk about existence when things exist, but the way something exists in eternity is completely different from the way it exists in time. Because in eternity, there is no was, there is no will be, there is no change, right? So eternity, the eternal has to be fundamentally durationless. It has no amount. It's not like it's just an instant. It has no length at all. It has no length because it's so infinitely small, has no length because it's not just because it's so infinitely big, but because there's no way of even thinking for Plato's mind between put caps on it, because things always remain the way they are. Things just exist. There is no before and after. There is no change. There's just pure existence, right? And so when we saw that word being before, fundamentally, that's what eternity is. It's a kind of unchanging being, right? And so when we talk now about how time, right? We said that time is a moving image of eternity, right? How is time an image of it? How is time a moving image of eternity? Time is an image of eternity because the way things exist in time, the way things exist in time, right? Temporal things, right? Is an image of how things exist in eternity, right? That things do kind of have an existence in time, but the existence of something in time is fleeting and temporary. Like in time, it's fleeting, right? That it as soon as it comes, it's already gone. So Plato won't use he won't really use the word being to describe the way something exists in time. That's why he uses the word becoming. The way something exists in time is just a becoming. The way something exists in eternity is a true being. Why? Because it's always the same. There's no change. It truly just sort of exists in what it is, while in becoming it's always changing. That things when they exist exactly as they are for an instant of a moment. But that moment in which something sort of remains what it is already gone. It's still of its long. So the only way to talk about something truly being something, the only way to say that something really is if it's not changing, but the not changingness of the now is just a fleeting moment, while the not changingness of eternity is eternal, has no beginning, has no end. It's not even just forever that it all goes forever into the past and the future. There is no past and future. There only is. Right. And so, I hope you can wrap your head around that. It's some tricky stuff. This lays down the foundation for how Plato thinks about all reality. And it's going to be very important for him to think about the nature of definitions themselves, because as we'll see, in order to truly get to the true definition of something, we're going to have to get to that unchanging, eternal object, which is the ultimate definitions of things. All right. And that's going to come a little bit. We'll start to set that up towards the end of our module here. And that's really what's going to make up our final module of studying Plato next week. All right. So I will catch you on the flip side, and where we'll start to read some of Plato's Cratylus and think about how some of this metaphysics has some epistemological implications. All right. Have a beautiful day.